What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSided college football betting show. I'm your host, Reed Wallach, joined by one of my favorite people on Twitter, I must say, one of my first friends in the sports betting community. He loves the group of five, arguably more than he does his high-profile matchups. It's Mike Calabrese at East Breeze on Twitter, EASTBREESE. He's the co-host of the Group of Five Deep Dive on the Action Network with another friend of the program, Mike Iannello, and he's also the director of U.S. content for OLBG. Mike, again, you're one of my favorite guys on Twitter. Thank you for joining the Early Read. How's it going?
It's going great. We're in the heart of conference play now, so a lot more even matchups on a weekly basis. It got a little dicey there trying to pick G5 teams, catching 30, 40 points a week playing SEC teams for paychecks. But now that we're into conference play here in October, it's a safe place for me. It's a happy place. Baseball playoffs, too. There's basically something to bet on every single day. It's a great time of year.
Yeah, we got Maction coming around in a few weeks. That's when we really get into it. We're talking like 5 days a week. We're betting on college football. So, that's not there yet, but we're getting there now with a conference play kicking up. But we have a busy show today. We, of course, have to talk last week. Bryce Young, sprained AC joint status up in the air for this week against Texas A&M. So we're going to talk some betting fallout from the Bryce Young injury. We have our marquee matchup, number 17 TCU taking on number 19 Kansas. Who would have thought we were talking about that game on October 4th before the season? And we got, of course, a whole bunch of bets to give out, including some SEC matchups, of course, our underdog best bet and the late night game. So we got a lot to get to. If you got any questions, we're going to answer them at the end of the show. So start, filing them in. We will get to them again at the end. And while you're over there, make sure you like and subscribe to BetSided's YouTube page. We got daily bet slip Monday through Friday. We got Matt Verderam and Ian McMillan's live stream of the NFL slate Sunday afternoons. And of course, this fine program, the Early Read. So make sure you like and subscribe to the show so we get all that to you. You ready to go, Mike? You ready to talk some college football?
Let's fire it up.
All right. So we'll start with kind of the biggest news from last week. That was, of course, Bryce Young injury suffered in the first half of the Alabama-Arkansas game. Got a little dicey in the second half with Young out. It's now being called a sprained AC joint, according to Nick Saban, day-to-day at the moment. Alabama pulls away, though, with Milroe at quarterback. We don't know his status going forward. We have to assume he's going to be a little bit limited in the next week or two if he even plays. Alabama's laying a huge number against Texas A&M this week. Tennessee on deck, I think, is the more concern, if we want to talk about it. But, Mike, what is your biggest kind of betting takeaway from this injury, no matter how long Bryce Young is out for?
I think Milroe immediately unlocks all the potential that Gibbs has. You saw it in the read option game where he finally was able to get some wiggle room and hit some home run plays, because no matter what, whoever's playing quarterback this year, they're not going to have the same dynamic passing game they did when they had Jamison Williams and Mechie III out on the perimeter. Yes, they have a lot of talented, young players out there, but they're not going to all of a sudden morph into these game changers. So they have to be able to hit big plays in the running game to truly have an elite running offense. And you also see it just in terms of the numbers. When a quarterback can run the way that Milroe can, and Bryce Young is absolutely functional in the pocket, he can extend plays, but he's extending to throw the ball. Milroe, all of a sudden, when you start to do the math, when he's running it, QB power off those read option plays, I think there's going to be some real issues for defenses, particularly A&M. So if I'm Nick Saban, I'm not rushing Bryce Young back in this game. The A&M defense, despite all of their talent, all the recruiting numbers, everything else, this depth, they're 97th against the run. They're giving up almost 4.5 yards per carry. So I think just being able to pair that with this electric Alabama defense, they're going to be able to win going away here. The real question is the week after that against Tennessee. It may devolve into a shootout given how well Tennessee's played on offense this year. But I think there's a little bit of fool's gold in the numbers when it comes to Tennessee's run defense. They're top 25. But they gave up over 100 yards rushing to Izzy Abanikanda. And I think in terms of, the star potential of Gibbs to pop off in that game, that's another game I think you get by with Milroe. So really, I'm sure Saban's not going to tip his hand, play it day to day, and really feed the media zero in terms of who he's going to start. But I think they're going to be fine whether it's Young or Milroe.
Yeah, especially, Jimbo Fisher coming to town, all that offseason fallout with the two of them. He's given him nothing. He is keeping this as close to the vest as possible. I agree. I don't think Bama, there's a concern that, one, Young is going to miss significant time, and this is going to ruin, their college football playoff aspirations. I wasn't crazy about Bama compared to, Georgia and Ohio State going into the year odds-wise. So this, I guess, keeps me – I still had Alabama as, my third choice of the three, to be honest. So this keeps me there. The bigger takeaway is the Heisman Trophy race, because everybody's still kind of packed together, whether it's CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Hendon Hooker, who I know we're going to talk about in a little bit. You want to throw Stetson Bennett in there. I know Adrian Martinez odds are up. I'm not considering him an actual Heisman contender, but he's in the mix now, I guess. So everyone's still bunched up. I did not buy Bryce Young in the Heisman Trophy market because there's only been one back-to-back winner. I was a little concerned with the pass catchers. I think that this injury, especially if going forward, is going to be a little bit limited, keep it more run-based, Jahmyr Gibbs more. I think this kind of X's Young out. I'm now curious, can someone further back, whether it's like a DJ Uiagalelei or a Stetson Bennett, can they play themselves and take some of Bryce Young's odds? Last week, he was 5-1. He's now back to 10-1 at FanDuel. Do you see someone in the Heisman Trophy market maybe getting themselves into the mix? Because CJ Stroud's the favorite at plus 150, but he hasn't necessarily wowed everyone just yet with this Ohio State offense.
For my money, last year, the best player in college football was Will Anderson. And I think there's an opportunity for him to take an even more elevated place in terms of the national consciousness, because if he plays really well in back-to-back games, say that Bryce Young is on the shelf, and even just the perception that the defense needs to play better, if he throws in 4 or 5 tackles for loss, forced fumble, interception, I mean, he already has the INT pick 6 this year. I think there's an opportunity for him legitimately to put himself in the middle of that Heisman conversation. Because honestly, a lot of this has to do with your year-over-year performance. I agree with you 100%. That's why Bryce Young was probably dead money from the start.
Yeah.
Where it's, how do you outdo what you did last year? And even some of the finalists, CJ Stroud in the same way. Ohio State's rolling on offense, but they're doing it a lot in the running game. He's not going to throw and get in these shootouts throwing for 400, 500 yards. So does that position a defensive player to be taken seriously? I also think a name ID comes into play to a certain degree. In September last year, only real diehards were talking a lot about Will Anderson. Now someone having won so many, defensive awards last year, inserted himself in the Heisman conversation down the stretch. I think he's decent, in terms of value on the board right now.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, I was talking about Dylan Gabriel at 50-1. That is even worse now. I don't even know where his odds are anymore. One player I do want to mention really quick before we move on, Stetson Bennett, I think, is in the mix. The numbers aren't there as much. It's more if Georgia, and I know they had a scare last week, but if Georgia's going to go on a run, and even especially I think if Alabama is to lose one now with Bryce Young hurt, Stetson Bennett has the narrative to make it to New York, where he's the quarterback of the number 1 team in the country, assuming Alabama falls and they stay ahead of Ohio State. But he's a quarterback of the number 1 team in the country. The offense is better this year than last year, arguably. Maybe Stetson Bennett plays himself into the mix where he's closer to 10-1, 8-1 versus, 20-1, 25-1, which he is across the board. So I think Stetson Bennett is, if we're talking like longer shot, you're going way deep. I can't get there with you with Will Anderson just because of you got to beat CJ Stroud still. So I think Stetson Bennett has a narrative going his way if he's the quarterback playing well on the number 1 team in the country.
I will say in relation to Stetson Bennett, it's interesting. In a lot of cases, quarterbacks have to compete sometimes with their receivers stealing their shine or running back in the backfield. Interestingly, Brock Bowers, does he, if you consider Stetson Bennett, are you also considering a tight end who I think he's got 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns at this point in the year? Not that that's going to siphon the picks, but it could siphon the interest a bit from Stetson Bennett going off as the number 1 guy on the ballot at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great point, but I think longer shot, I think Bryce Young, though, we can both agree, trending in the wrong direction, and then, we'll see what happens. But some good Heisman Trophy talk there. Let's talk some marquee matchup, TCU, Kansas. Before we get there, let's just recap the picks for last week. My picks on the show, 6-2 last week. Best show record so far, 11-5-1 over our last 2 weeks, 22-17-1 on the year. So we love to see that. Getting some CLV and also making some money along the way, but it's a new week. So let's get to it. TCU, like we said, just absolutely boat raced Oklahoma last week, 55-24. I think they could have put up more if they wanted to. They now get Kansas, who kind of the darling of the media this year, the breakout year, 5-0. They were underdogs last week, and I think I had Kansas last week. They were lucky to win that game. Took 3 Iowa State missed field goals to get there. They're now catching even more against TCU, who I bet on them before the season to win the Big 12. I'm on their over win total. So this is a team that, we call them the early readers. They are invested in if they watch the preseason show. Mike, are you seeing Kansas keeping this going, or is TCU, they're a Big 12 contender. They are legit. There's no let up here with College Game Day going to Lawrence.
The coaching carousel, the head coaches get all the love in the offseason, but I love to target in on those coordinators. And Joe Gillespie was one of the
Yep.
best hires in all of college football, in my opinion. He took over a defense that was horrid last year for TCU. 118th in scoring, 119th in total D, 104th in turnovers generated. You look at their numbers through, almost halfway through the season now, 45th in scoring, 65th in total D, 21st in turnovers generated. It may not seem like they're an elite defense, but that's a huge jump. And when you pair it what they've been able to do offensively, I think TCU is absolutely the play here. And also the blueprint was handed over by John Heacock, who one of my favorite defensive coordinators, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire country. He shut down that Kansas attack. Jalen Daniels was you want to talk sleepers for the Heisman Trophy. He was on a run, 10 touchdowns, no picks in 3 games. He goes 7 for 14 for 93 yards with only 9 rushing yards. So when you pair that up in this game, I think Gillespie's as talented as there is in the game right now. He's going to borrow some of that. And honestly, the offensive element of it, I think what was undersold, Iowa State moved the football. They lost Brock early in that game, and they couldn't run the football. They became a little one-dimensional beyond the special teams miscues. So I think in this spot, Duggan, the rest of, they do a lot of those kind of like orbital motions where they fake out the screens, they run counters off it, they run QB counters. I think they're going to be dynamic. I think they're going to hit some really big plays. And this is against a Kansas defense that when you look at quarterbacks hurting them, Duke's quarterback did it. Clayton Tune even went for over 60 yards rushing. I think this is going to be a big game for Duggan. 7 points doesn't scare me away. I'd play it all the way up to 9.5.
Yeah, I think we see eye to eye here. I think the buck stops here for the Jayhawks. Great story, a lot of fun. I think that they're in trouble because I was bullish on TCU before the year, and they have lived up to the hype, especially now that almost like a fortuitous injury to Chandler Morris. Obviously, hope he's okay, but I mean, Duggan was backing him up, and now all of a sudden he's back and he's realizing his potential. The team total isn't out yet, but if you project it by implied totals, around 36.5. I played up to 38. I think TCU, this offense is a wagon. Most yards per play in the country. The offensive line is elite. Kansas, outside the top 100 in defensive line yards, so they're not getting a push at the line of scrimmage. 80th in success rate. I just think TCU rolls here. I think, like you said, Mike, they're going to be able to hit big plays. They play fast. They're going to, they're not looking to ease up here. We saw it against Oklahoma. They want to put up points in bunches. So, I mean, I like TCU with the points. I think, the spread is a little rich now where it opens. So I instead want to go team total over 36.5 up to 38 is still good for me. So we both think TCU rolls here. Big 12 conference championship contender, I think for sure. So there it is again, the marquee matchup. Mike taking TCU laying the 7. I am on TCU team total over 36.5 as we keep it rolling here on the early read. So Mike, like I said, you co-host the Action Network's Group of 5 deep dive. This is, strictly for like true degens who are looking to get their Sun Belt, their Conference USA, their MAC fix. So, this is a special segment for you. A Group of 5 best bet. Mine is vile. Yours not as much. So tell me about Kent State, Miami of Ohio. What are you thinking here with your Group of 5 best bet?
So for starters, it's all about knowing your personnel, particularly when it comes to betting the bottom of the board games. And Miami of Ohio, without their starting quarterback, Brett Gabbert, he's probably going to be out for the entire season. Avion Smith comes in, dynamic runner. He shredded the Buffalo defense on the ground last week, but he's really kind of scattershot in the passing game. And that really plays to Kent State because they have some issues on their back end in terms of pass defense. But I think they can bow their necks a little bit, play bend but not break, and stop them in the red zone. And when they have the ball, this offense is absolutely dynamic. Colin Schley, 475 total yards in the MAC opener last week. They end up stubbing their toe in the red zone twice. They got down to the Ohio 11. They took a sack, a penalty. They actually punt. They get down to the Ohio 13 in the second half, a strip sack, fumble loss. If those things come together, they cover that number against the Bobcats that opened at 7 and bubbled all the way up to 13. So you can see a lot of steam on this Kent State team that cut their teeth against a really, really strong non-conference schedule, to put it lightly. They played Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia. They cover against Oklahoma. They cover against Georgia. Looked really good doing it. And it's not just Schley. I mean, they have Marquez Cooper, who went for over 200 yards rushing, last week. They probably have the best receiving core in the MAC between Cephas and Walker as their 1 and 2. I think this offense is ready to pop again. So I don't mind laying the 6 under that key number. I think that's actually a gift. So I'll go ahead with the Golden Flashes here with, if everything trends in their direction down the stretch, they may be favored in all but one game in MAC play. So I think you're getting potentially the best team in the MAC under a touchdown. Got to go ahead and play that.
Yeah, don't hate it at all. Mine, much grosser. I'm going to take the plus 28 with South Florida against Cincinnati. And, I tweeted on Saturday how dead South Florida looked and stuff like that. They were down. I think they let up like 30 plus points to East Carolina last week. They also closed. First of all, the game was moved. It was on a neutral site. They closed 9.5 in that game to East Carolina, who is maybe a middle of the pack, above average AAC team. They're now playing Cincinnati, catching 28. That seems a bit far for my liking. I make Cincinnati closer, like 24.5. So, you're getting 4 touchdowns here with South Florida. And I watched Cincy last week against Tulsa. I had the over in the game and somehow stayed under. But besides the point, they get a pick 6 early in the game, but the offense really sputtered in the second half. And I saw that again against Indiana as well. These are two teams that could hang around. And now you're getting South Florida, egregious number. Again, they were 14.5 to Louisville 2 weeks ago, 9.5 to ECU. Now you're getting all the way to 28. Since he has a bye next week, then they get SMU and UCF the following 2 weeks. Are they going to try and run this up? I don't think so. South Florida has, a former Power 5 quarterback in Bohannon. I just think plus 28. I mean, this has to be like rock bottom rating for the Bulls. So you're going to give me 4 touchdowns. I'll take it again. I think Cincinnati slowed up in these games after halftime, and that can maybe help South Florida get in the back door. Remember, this is a team that should have beat Florida on the road a few weeks ago. Now you're getting 28 against Cincinnati, who, I don't know, I still don't think is like as good as people are making out to be. They should have not covered against Tulsa last week.
I agree with you. And Luke Fickell, we have enough evidence, multiple years as the head coach. He's a conservative head coach, even though, if they have a big lead, they're going to go to Prater off of the bench. And in my opinion, he's a little bit more dynamic in the passing game. But even with that said, he's still limited by the play calling. So I agree with you. I think this is an interesting play. I know you're dumpster diving on this one. My only concern is Ivan Pace Jr., who is basically the G5 Will Anderson. He is a tackle for loss machine. He can destroy a backfield. So Gary Bohannon's got to keep his head on a swivel on this one.
For sure. I just think, this is like rock bottom for South Florida. And you got to play against it. I mean, 28, that's just a little crazy to me. So there's our group of 5 best bets. Had to pull out all the stops for Mike coming on. Again, he is on Kent State, laying 6 against Miami of Ohio. I am taking South Florida plus 28 against Cincinnati. Hopefully they can keep it somewhat relatively close. We go from the group of 5 to the SEC. So we go from, some small conference games to the best in the college football. So talking SEC here, Mike, I'll start with you because we were talking before we started about Tennessee LSU. So I want to get your thoughts on this one. Tennessee minus a juice 2.5 at LSU ahead of the Alabama game.
Yeah, I think this is a play that seems like a trap, but this is a game that Tennessee absolutely has to have if they want to be in the race to win the SEC East. So I don't think there's any opportunity even looking forward given what's ahead of them on their schedule. But this is up against an LSU pass offense that essentially is broken. They were 10 for 26 last week, 85 yards against Auburn. And granted, Auburn's a top 30 pass defense, but they made them look absolutely elite. And then when you flip it over, LSU gives up 337 yards through the air to Robbie Ashford in his second start. I mean, Hendon Hooker's got to be licking his chops here, even without Cedric Tillman, who's still going to be on the shelf probably through the end of October. Brew McCoy moving up into that wide receiver 2 role, Jalen Hyatt on the perimeter as well. I think the known factor in this game is the Tennessee offense. I think they're going to go for 31 plus in this one. So it's a question of, can they shore up a really leaky pass defense? You saw a lot of garbage time yards by Anthony Richardson 2 weeks ago at Neyland's. I think there's an opportunity for LSU to improve, but to improve enough to beat a Tennessee team that I think is, a bona fide top 10 squad right now. I just don't see it. So I'm going to go ahead with Hendon Hooker, who, by the way, if you look back to last year, how did he perform against quality SEC defenses on the road? 3 touchdowns at Alabama, 4 touchdowns at Kentucky. He's not someone who only feasts on home cooking. So I'm going to see Hooker and the offense getting it going here, and Tennessee probably winning by, we'll call it 7 to 10 points.
Yeah, this was going to be a no touch for me. And, I was chatting with one of my buddies, we talk opening lines and, he goes, Tennessee has to be the trap of the week, laying 3 at LSU. And I was like, yeah, I make it a little bit more than 3. Don't really have an interest in playing it. Got bet down to 2.5. I, snagged it. I know it's juice 2.5. I still like it. Again, this also, Jane Daniels got banged up in that Auburn game last week. They probably should have lost after Robbie Ashford, like you said, kind of carved them up. So I think Tennessee's going to win this one going away. I like the Vols as well. So I'm on that with you. For my SEC bet, though, I'm going to go over 49.5. South Carolina, Kentucky. I know you think Kentucky. We just watched that rock fight against Ole Miss last week in the noon slate. That game probably should have went over. I was on the under. Kentucky, Will Levis, 2 fumbles inside the green zone. Ole Miss got stopped at the goal line. Game lands 22-19. Now you get South Carolina's defense that is 113th in EPA per rush. Chris Rodriguez came back from suspension for Kentucky. I think he's going to get going on the ground for a Kentucky offense that needs to get going on the ground. I mean, they've been terrible without him. So I think South Carolina is exactly what the doctor ordered for this Kentucky offense. And on the other side, the Wildcats defense has not been getting a ton of pressure. Only 6 sacks on the year. Spencer Rattler, this team has been playing from behind, but he can still hit explosive plays. They're 31st in explosive pass rate. So I think something in the neighborhood of Kentucky getting over 30 and South Carolina doing their end to get, low 20s, mid 20s. I think Kentucky wins this one comfortably, but I think it's going to be higher scoring than expected. South Carolina has been in some higher scoring games. We look at the Arkansas game. I know Arkansas's defense isn't Kentucky's, but 44-30 final. So I think, Rattler playing from behind, he could throw some picks and give short fields to Kentucky, but he could also hit a few chunk plays. So I'll go over there. I think that's a bit of a discount there with Kentucky's recent play. So there's our SEC best bets. Mike is on Tennessee -2.5 against LSU. I'm with him there. I also played the over 49.5 South Carolina versus Kentucky. Now we're going to talk some underdog best bets here. 2 juicy ones, both in prime time. Mike, talk to me about BYU Notre Dame.
I was a little bit shocked to see BYU as the underdog here, a de facto holy war, but it's in Sin City. It's not in South Bend. And that BYU's fan base is going to travel. So I think they're going to have a de facto home field advantage in this one. And I'm a little bit confused, to be honest, because I think what's happening is people look at the last performance from Notre Dame against that North Carolina defense. Oh, okay, the offense is fixed. They're going to be able to score 28 plus. UNC's awful on defense. They're in the triple digits in scoring D, total D, opponent's completion percentage, and they were able to just do whatever they wanted in terms of the Fighting Irish offense. Whereas BYU, I think, given the fact that they've had kind of a revolving door at the skill positions because of injuries, you got Puka Nacua, Chase Roberts, Miles Davis, all banged up. But I've been reading, the tea leaves in terms of Satake mentioning who's available the whole year. Basically dating back to the opener against USF. And his tone is a lot more optimistic in this one. So I think if he gets 1-2 of those guys back, you're pairing him with Jaren Hall, who's quietly playing some great football. 12-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 70% completions. Gunnar Romney back from a lacerated kidney. He's going to be in his second game, kind of shaking off the rust. I think BYU's offense is going to be able to move the football. And defensively, I really like what they're going to be able to do to contain a Notre Dame run offense as well as they possibly can. Certainly better than North Carolina defense that was a full-on turnstile in their last game. So I'm going to go with BYU on the money line here. I actually think the wrong team's favored.
Yeah, I'm with you here. BYU, this is a team I was high on all season long. I think, the luster kind of came off them after that Oregon loss, which was like a miserable spot for them. But this is a veteran defense that I think could contain a very vanilla Notre Dame offense with Playa quarterback. They want to run the ball. I agree. Jaren Hall's the far better quarterback. He's an NFL prospect, in my opinion. I agree. I was shocked when this line came out. I thought I would have to play BYU like +1.5. Like I see Notre Dame maybe favored on neutral, but like +4 over a field goal. Give me a break. I think BYU could put up points in bunches here and really pull ahead on the scoreboard. So I'm with you there. We were just talking, BYU is one of my teams. We now get my favorite fade. We're going back to the well. We are going to be fading USC here against Washington State. I've been calling for it. We're trying again. I make this game 10. So 11 was a buy for me when it opened. 13, I still like it. Washington State's able to run the ball at a very high level. They're 25th in EPA per rush. USC's 118th in EPA per rush on defense. So if Washington State is going to be able to move those chains, Cameron Ward's going to have to avoid turnovers against this very opportunistic USC defense. They finally had a turnover last week. They're all about generating turnovers. That's it. They can't stop anyone. Meanwhile, Washington State's defense, I know what Wisconsin sucked, but they went on the road and shut them down. They kept Oregon down for at least a half. They're top 25 in success rate. I think Washington State could do a lot of things to keep up with USC, keep it within 2 scores. I think they're live to win this one also. Do not think that this USC team that's full of transfers, that's full of high-profile guys, isn't looking ahead to next week when they go to Utah. I could see them overlooking Washington State. I could see them getting got. Give me the Cougs. I think that they're live in this one. Mike, are you with me or against me?
I agree with you. When it comes to USC's defense, they're a paper tiger. I mean, just cue up the Jesse Pinkman Breaking Bad meme. They can't keep getting away with it. They can't keep getting gouged on the ground and then getting bailed out with turnover luck. And you even saw it at the beginning of the season against Rice. They gave up like 5.6 yards per carry to Rice. That means anybody can run on this defense. And I agree with you. I think Washington State's going to be a live dog in this game. It's really going to come down to Cam Ward. Can he play a little bit better? Can he take those steps forward and really kind of challenge them in the second half? Because if he throws some picks early, I could see this getting out of hand, because USC's offense, when they are clicking, when they are at home, they look pretty much elite. But I do like the situational element of it as well with Utah on deck.
Yeah, I think we saw this with Fresno State. They fell behind by a little too much and they couldn't keep up. Of course, Jake Haener gets hurt. That ruined any shot at cover. But Oregon State, they were behind. They were minus in the turnover margin. They still kept up with USC. I think if Cam Ward can protect the ball, the talent is there for Cam Ward. I mean, he was slinging it against Oregon. If he's on his game, this game is going to be up for grabs in the final minutes. Whoever has the ball last, I think, can win. It's a high total game. I think Washington State's game here, they've showed that they can play up to their competition. So, yeah, I think USC could get caught looking ahead here. So, give me Washington State. We'll try this again here, fading USC. Meanwhile, they let Arizona State, who's a corpse, go up and down the field on them last week. So, there's Mike. He's taking BYU plus 150 on the money line. I'm going to take the points with Washington State because it's a little bit bigger of an underdog, plus 13, but I'm also on the money line. I think that this is an upset. I think, we finally get them. We finally get USC and beat those frauds. But that game is at 7:30. We have more late night action for you, though. Primetime action. Mike, talk to me about another Pac-12 matchup between Oregon and Arizona and what you're looking for.
So it's pretty simple. Let's just look at the stat cards for these two teams. Oregon total offense 18th, defense 96th. Arizona total offense 10th, defense 76th. And then when you dig in even a little bit deeper in terms of big plays, Arizona, to no surprise of us here in G5 land, when they got Jacob Cowling away from UTEP, we were like, this is the difference maker. And he has been. They're third nationally in plays at 20 yards per more. And then when you look at Oregon, they give up big plays all the time, 61st nationally in surrendering plays at 20 yards or more. And then finally, kind of just historically, when Oregon travels down to the desert, it's bad news for the Ducks. 44-15 in 2018. You got to go all the way back to 2013 for the last time. Before that the Wildcats shocked them in Tucson 42-16. But it's just the home cooking, the night game there in Tucson. I don't know. I'm kind of bullish on this Arizona team to lay a big number on Oregon. And interestingly, in just about a month's time, I went from, okay, who's the backup behind Bo Nix because he's not going to survive the season, and now he's all of a sudden a dual threat savant. So I'm not going to buck that trend. I'm going to go over. It's sitting in the 70-point range. I played up to 71.5. Going to go over on this total.
Yeah, this was written down like on my Sunday sheet before the openers came out. Oregon, Arizona over. Had both teams over last week. I mean, both these offenses can hum. Jane DeLore looks great at Arizona with Cowing, like you said. A little bit too rich for me now at 70. Maybe if it comes back down, I'll be in. But to me, this is over a pass. You can't take an under with these two offenses. Also, their defenses too. I'm looking back on more the East Coast. I'm going to lay the points with NC State. There's cheap 3.5s out there. Might juice threes. I like both. I played 3.5 minus 105. I think you're getting NC State at a discount here. I thought they actually acquitted themselves quite well against Clemson. Clemson's the best team in the ACC, so I don't think losing convincingly to Clemson on the road is that bad. I think that this is a very good buy low spot on NC State, though. Florida State's defense, 100th in defensive success rate. I know that they're trending up macro with Norvell, but I still, who have they beat? They beat LSU in week 1 on neutral in a chaotic game. They beat Louisville, who's a mess. They beat Boston College, who is one of the worst ACC teams. I just think this North Carolina State team is going to relish the opportunity to get back at home. It's a veteran unit. The season isn't over yet. New Year's Six Bowl is still within reach. Leary, I think, could cook a little bit against this FSU defense. That's 87th in EPA per pass. NC State's defense is the best unit on the field. So I'm going to take them at a small number. I mean, you're telling me that these two teams are pretty much equal. Florida State just lost at home to Wake Forest. I know Sam Hartman's great, but that North Carolina State defense is far and away better than Wake Forest. So, going on the road, give me the Wolfpack here, minus 3.5. I have this closer to 5, so I like it through 4.
Yeah, the coaching staff mismatch in this one tells the story. Tony Gibson's 3-3-5 defense, I think, is going to give, Jordan Travis and that FSU offense fits. And then do we really need to see more from Norvell in tight
Yeah.
situations where play calling makes a difference? He basically should have given away the LSU opener. So I agree. With a line this short, you may as well go with the better defense and the better coaching staff.
Yeah, there's our late night picks. Make sure you get those questions in. We're going to get to them in just a few minutes. But Mike, he's taking the over 70 in Oregon, Arizona. I am playing NC State minus 3.5 against Florida State. You could pay a little bit more and get the -3. That's perfectly fine. That's widely available. Mike, I got 2 more plays for best of the rest, and then we'll get to some questions. But I misread the market here on Stanford, Oregon State over. I played 58.5. I projected closer to 60. It's now 56. Maybe, people are reacting to this Chance Nolan neck injury on Oregon State, but I don't think that's going to factor into this game because Oregon State, the offensive line is going to absolutely feast against Stanford's defense. 20th in line yards. They're 27th in explosive rush. And Stanford's defense is terrible. I stayed up until 3 a.m. to watch them play Oregon last week. We were just talking about it. David Shaw has this team playing through the bitter end, trying to go over the total. I swear to God. He plays through no matter what. Tanner McKee stays until the end. He settles for 3 when they're down by 24. He tries to get this game over. So this Stanford team is a play on over team for me. They have either scored or allowed 40 plus points in every single game this year. Oregon State, I think you're getting a good buy low spot. 16 points against Utah. They probably should have scored some more. Of course, that USC slugfest, 14 points. They also scored 30 plus against Boise and Fresno State. I think we're going to see more of that now with Oregon State, whether it's Nolan or Geba, their veteran backup. So I think over, all the way to 60, I think is good here with Stanford, Oregon State. That's a real late night game. That's an 11 o'clock start. Pray for me. I'm going to be up till 3 a.m. probably watching that. And then Friday night, I'm going to take the 3 with Rutgers, +3 against Nebraska. I think this is a little bit of an overreaction. Nebraska, they got their first cover last week against Indiana. Not as impressive as it seems. Less than 5 yards per play. And Rutgers is a far better defense than Indiana. Top 40 in terms of defensive success rate. They could shut down the ground game, allow less than 3 yards per rush. I just think, Nebraska, their defense outside the top 100 in success rate. Maybe Rutgers get the offense going just a little bit in a low total game under 50. I'll take the +3 at home on a short week. I don't know why we're all of a sudden buying Nebraska after they cover against Indiana, who's terrible. So Rutgers +3, Oregon State versus Stanford over 56. Those are 2 more plays. Mike, you got anything else you want to share for the audience?
Well, I will share in terms of your over in that Stanford game. I think it's being undersold a little bit, the philosophy change. Now with E.J. Smith out for the year, I think that just puts all the eggs in the Tanner McKee basket. So I do think they're going to be throwing even more and potentially, cooking up some points in the fourth quarter to aid in that over. One game that I liked last week that got moved because of Hurricane Ian is SMU UCF.
Okay, Wednesday. Really early read.
Really early read. We're sitting here at 64.5. I like it up to 68. And it's pretty simple. The Gus bus is now rolling. When you add in John Rice Plumlee in the rushing attack, they can probably go for 300 yards in this game because the SMU run defense stinks out loud. They cannot stop anybody. And then on the other side of things, Tanner Mordecai is going to be throwing into kind of an underwhelming UCF secondary. They're pretty stout in the front 7, but beyond that, if SMU can protect him, which basically that's the where these performances for SMU diverge. If they keep him upright and a clean jersey, he's going to throw for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns, probably a lot of them going to Rice. If they end up getting that pressure, he kind of wilts in those situations. So I'm going to bank on the coaching staff being able to protect him, whether it's keeping in running backs, tight ends to chip, and going after a UCF defense. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of big plays in the running game. Plumlee is somebody at the quarterback position. Now that Milroe's in for Alabama, he's still a top 3 rushing quarterback in the entire country. So I like over here. I think you're going to see kind of a weird, wild energy for a midweek game at the Bounce House. And I think it's going to be it's kind of a fun AAC shootout.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that one for sure. And then while we still wait for some more questions to come in, make sure you get those in. Me and Mike are going to go through them. Why don't you tell us about, the work you're doing with the Action Network when the new pod comes out with Mike Einell, and then also some of the content you're doing with OLBG.
Sure. So every Wednesday we record the Group of Five deep dive under the Big Bets on Campus banner. We basically provide everything in those five conferences, looking at round robins, money line underdogs, spreads, totals, everything like that. Those release on Wednesday afternoon. And then the rest of our staff, Stuckey and Colin Wilson, they do the full national spread on Thursdays. And we also have a live show on Saturdays. That is great. It's with Brett McMurphy. So you get all that last little juicy intel in terms of injuries, coaching intrigue, all those kind of things. And then for OLBG, they're an outfit out of the UK. They've been around since 2002. They've really expanded aggressively in the last 2 years, moving from covering European sports, soccer obviously being top among them, but snooker, darts, everything. I wasn't even familiar with how aggressive the Europeans are on betting on just about anything under the sun. But now they're expanding into North America, and I had the great honor of trying to usher that in terms of the American sports betting landscape. So we're covering everything on the pro and college side there, as well as entertainment and political futures as well. So if you can bet on it, we're throwing a market down and trying to give some good advice.
Awesome. And then, you can follow Mike again at East Breeze on Twitter, EASTBREESE. Let's get to some questions, though, because I know we missed on a few of what we thought would be the marquee matchup. This was penciled in, but, you lose too much. That's what happens. So Red River, the Sooners are now down to +7.5, according to Jerry Friedman. He wants to know, is that too many points? I think this comes down to Dylan Gabriel's injury status. It looks like Quinn Ewers is going to be back. It seemed like the last few weeks he may have been able to play, holding him out for this one. I mean, again, I think this is a Gabriel's not playing number. And in that case, probably just no interest. I don't know. This game is this is one I'm probably just passing on in general. Mike, you have any opinion here?
It's also a pass for me, but if you twist my arm, I'm going to lay the points with Texas because the potential of viewers elevating that offense, we all saw that in the first half against Alabama, what he gives them in downfield passing game. But in terms of the quarterback situation, it's a mess in Norman right now, and there's no longer the quarterback whisperer, Lincoln Riley, to be able to extract some value out of whoever they end up rolling the dice with as their QB1. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe lean Texas, but I agree. In a rivalry like this with so many emotions running hot, it's probably best to just keep your money on the sideline.
Yeah, just with too much injury questions. Especially now on Tuesday, this probably isn't the show for that. We try to give you more certainty. This one has a ton of uncertainty. Now, we didn't talk about, of course, my Wisconsin Badgers. We fired Paul Chryst last week. Jerry also wants to know, will they bounce back and cover 9.5 versus terrible Northwestern team? I had this written down as I wanted to bet Northwestern. Then Wisconsin fired Paul Chryst. Really quick thought on that. I did defend Paul Chryst for a while. That's my guy. Took us to some Orange Bowls. That's awesome. But it was running stale. It was apparent. I think, Wisconsin needs to start getting with the times. I think that this is a sign that the new AD and the new leadership at Wisconsin are going to be more aggressive. Give Jim Leonard a real chance. Can he maybe capture some fire here and, lock down the full-time job? We'll see. But ultimately, if Graham Mertz is going to be the quarterback, I can't back this team. The new coach angle hasn't really worked this year. I'm not interested in backing Wisconsin, though. Probably Northwestern or pass with me, just given the roster constraints of Wisconsin.
I just look at it as Northwestern had everything go their way last week in Happy Valley in terms of turnovers and, just fumbles being handed to them, and they couldn't capitalize at all. And Evan Hull, he was a nice story early in the season. He was leading them in receiving, leading them in rushing. Maybe he's the Swiss Army knife to kind of just drag them to the verge of bowl eligibility. Not so much anymore. So I just don't really see Northwestern moving the football all that effectively. I know it's difficult to get yourself fired up about a Badger offense that, particularly Braylon Allen. I mean, what's going on with the running game? You would think that would be their bread and butter and they could just bully the Wildcats here. But once again, I lean Wisconsin, but with so many unanswered questions in terms of the coaching coming into this game, that this should be a pass.
Yeah, I boycotted the game last week because I'm done with Graham Mertz, and I said that the Badgers need change. They got me back though with they got me back with a fire. So I'll watch the Wisconsin Northwestern game to give Jim Leonard a chance. I'll do it for respect to him, but that's pretty much it. And then final question from Jerry here: any first half leans, such as it seems like he's looking like bigger favorites in the first half? Bama, Georgia, Ohio State. I'll go first. I was thinking Ohio State first half. Not sure what the number is going to be on this one. I imagine it's going to be, north of 14, probably closer to like 17. But this Michigan State team is terrible. Half the defensive starters are out. The offense can't keep up. The Ohio State defense is really starting to look the part as well. I think that this is a name your number for Ohio State. I would rather go probably first half over full game just because they're on the road. Maybe they want to get out of there. But, first half, I haven't really gotten that deep into it. Ohio State would probably be a look for me, though. Their team total over also, in the 40 should be okay. This Michigan State team can't stop anybody.
Let's pair that Ohio State play up with Alabama. I'm not
Okay.
breaking any news here. Alabama is fantastic in the first half, in big numbers in SEC play. And this is a pure blood rivalry game. You know that Saban is going to fire up his team to go ahead and lay a huge number on A&M. And as I mentioned, I think they're almost more explosive because of the running game right now, the way that it's going with Milroe in there. If it's Milroe, it's a play for me. If it's Bryce Young, you don't know necessarily, are they going to protect him with the play calling? They don't want him to take hits. So it's injury dependent there. But if it's Milroe, I'm going to go ahead and take Alabama minus a big number in the first half.
Interesting insight there from Mike. And then Greg Schwartz just chimed in with BYU Notre Dame. We spoke about that one in the Underdog pick segment, not to give it away. So just go rewind. We have plenty of info on that BYU Notre Dame game. Me and Mike are seeing eye to eye there. But in the meantime, let's bring up that recap graphic, for people like Greg. We could show everyone what we have. Mike is taking TCU -7 against Kansas, Kent State -6 against Miami of Ohio, Tennessee -2.5 against LSU, BYU on the money line against Notre Dame at +150, and Oregon, Arizona over 70 late night. I am taking TCU team total over 36.5. That's good to 38. South Florida +28 against Cincinnati. South Carolina, Kentucky over 49.5. Washington State catching 13 against USC, and NC State -3.5 against Florida State. Those are our early read best bets. Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Make sure you check him out at the Action Network. His Group of Dive Deep Dive podcast with Mike Ionello comes out tomorrow afternoon. That's Wednesday for those podcast listeners. And a big shout out to Joanne Woodcock. She does everything behind the scenes for the show. Until then, we will see you for week 7 of college football. Everybody have a profitable weekend.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.